Yes, guys, welcome back. Another episode of Teams Like Brighton. And while we're still on the high of that Chelsea win, we still have a game to think about going ahead into this weekend. And it's a short journey up to the Black Country. The Molineux is the venue, Wolverhampton Wanderers away. Richie, what are your thoughts?
I've never been to Molineux before. I'm looking forward to it. I've just got my match day accreditation through, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to say looking forward again. Another chance to look at the away day grub, as we like to do here on teams like Brighton. So,
Yes, we
but in
need to
terms of
catch
the
up. We need to
game,
catch up on that. We've got a lot of scran
I
to go through.
I think what we should do is when the World Cup rolls around after the Villa game on November 13th, we'll do a big collection all in one and look at all the away scram. I think that'll be good. But on the Wolves game, I mean, it's a good time to play them, you could argue. You know, they're 19th in the table. I think they've only scored 6 goals from 13 matches. Their top scorer is, I think, Ruben Neves, who's a defensive midfield player with 3 goals. So that says a lot.
Yeah, it
There's
does.
still, what's it
But
there?
then again, I've got to just jump in here. Ruben Neves scores nothing but bangers. So he scored 3 bangers. He's top goal scorer. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, if you ask me. But yeah, like you say, like they do have a striker problem.
Yes, they've got. We'll chat to Birmingham Live's Alex Dickon a little bit later, just for the lowdown on Wolves. But yeah, they're without, I think, 3 strikers, and they were pretty solid at the back at the start of the season, but now they've been letting in a fair few. 19 goals conceded. They're still looking for a new manager. I think they approached QPR's, was it Mick Beale,
Yeah.
and he rejected them.
The
Uh,
brains behind Steven Gerrard's Rangers and Villa before he left.
there you
He was
go.
the brains for it all. And then when he left,
And they
Gerrard
were
had
left
no
with the
answer. Villa
brawn.
went tumbling down. It's just such a shame we don't get to see Gerrard in all his tactical genius at the Amex next weekend.
I think there's a heavy dose of sarcasm there from dear Tomo. But
Me?
yes,
Never.
so yeah, I mean I think they've not won in their last 3 games. I think 2 losses and a draw. I think the mood around Molineux at the moment is pretty low. So they're still managerless, a month or so without a manager. I think this is a pretty good time to play them. Obviously, Brighton won 3-0 at this ground back in late April. So it would be really, really good to build on that fantastic result against Chelsea. And obviously, it'll be a real blow if they don't, because the Wolves are right for the taking.
Yeah, absolutely. They have built themselves up with a reputation, especially under Nuno Espirito Santo, of being a solid, well structured Premier League side. And then since Santos left, like their chances of European football has been more or less close to nil. They just haven't really invested massively in the squad overall in the future anyway. Like we've seen a couple of potential players in Diogo Jota. Daniel Podence is probably a bit of a threat as well, but I mean
You say
Jota's
Diego
gone off.
Potter?
Diego Jota. Diego
Oh,
Jota.
that wasn't Diego Potter. I was like, is that the Spanish cousin or something to Graham Potter?
Potter's in my head rent free. That's it. That's just it. No, yeah. Well, Potter's done so well over at Liverpool, and you know he's amassed and Wolves have amassed a fortune from that as well, from the transfer fee. But they just don't seem to be really investing back into it, and they had to go and bring in Diego Costa to sort out their transfer injuries. Can't remember the striker they brought in, but he had knee problems anyway, and he
Yes,
got brought up in the medical.
Kalancic. He I
Yes,
think did like an ACL in his first game or something like that.
despite the fact that he was already brought up in the medical that he had problems with his knees, so he was vulnerable to that type of injury. But they still signed him anyway. So it's kind of like they're kind of like giving themselves the kiss of death in that sense. They shot themselves in the foot big time with that. Don't get me wrong, good. He was a good striker on paper, but if they're not going to do the basics in terms of recruitment, then this is where you're going to find yourself. You're in the panic station, and you have to rely on the very well experienced Diego Costa, who, am I right in saying he's suspended for this match?
Yeah,
Still?
we talked about in the last podcast that it was his first ever Premier League red card,
That's right.
amazingly. So he's out for the next 3 matches. Yeah.
Yes, amazingly. So yeah, he's out. So he's he apologized apparently to the dressing room, to his teammates, and to the coaching staff. Yeah, he let his side down, and he was guaranteed to have minutes behind him while they sort out their situation up front. But now they've got themselves in a bit of a difficult situation for the next coming weeks. Well, next 2 matches before the World Cup starts, and then they still can't do anything about it because they're going to have to rely on what they have at their disposal. And I think, if I remember rightly, Diego Costa's got 3-match ban. So he's not even going to come back until after the first match, after the World Cup. So again, there's a lot of positives coming our way in this. We just need to make sure that that there are no banana skins ahead of that. But I mean, from what we're seeing already from De Zerbi, the team's clicked brilliantly. We're going to be a threat. It'll be interesting to see how De Zerbi sets up on away games. That's what I think.
One thing just to add on the Wolves thing, I think they actually have. I think there was definitely a period of time during maybe the start of the season. So still, there was a few weeks left of the transfer window where Wolves fans were like, "Yeah, we need to buy players. We haven't bought in players." But I think they did bring in. I think it was a midfielder from Sporting called Nunes, and he was like 40 odd million. And they also spent, I think, nearly 30 million on a winger. I think Guedes, but he's just not done well. I think Nathan Collins came in from Burnley for nearly 20 million. And then they also turned Huang's, I think, loan to a permanent. But I think generally my takeaway is that, and also going back to Fabio Silva, this young striker they bought, I think Wolves have splashed the cash, but just the signings have been flops. There's just been a real haphazard approach when it comes to transfers. And they just haven't, many of them haven't bedded into the team well. So that's obviously, not helping them. But yes, on your point about how Brighton set up, I was lucky enough to go to Roberto De Zerbi's press conference today, and he was sort of asked about the latest team news for Brighton, and Danny Welbeck's back from his illness, and Joel Veltman looks like he could maybe feature as well after recovering from a muscular problem. But he said, when asked about sort of team news, he said, the best first 11 I can choose. Welbeck is good. I don't know if he starts or not, because all the players that played against Chelsea did well. So maybe there's a little hint there that it might be an unchanged side. I mean, that's, it's interesting to see if would Welbeck come back in. Obviously, he scored no goals, but he does help the team for sure. Pascal Gross obviously played very well at right back, but you probably don't want to put him there every week. And if you had, I think Traore plays on the right, but you would almost have the tortoise and the hare there in terms of speed difference. Like Traore is an absolute speedster. But yes, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't know. Maybe Veltman comes back in. Does that mean if he does, Estupiñán maybe drops out, or Gross is played very well this season. He doesn't really, even if he moves around, I don't think he justifies being dropped. So there's good dilemmas to have, I guess. And obviously Sarmiento and Enciso are good young talents as well. So there's definitely good options there. But yeah, what do you reckon in terms of how Brighton will actually line up?
I'm quite curious to see what De Zerbi does with Lamptey, or have I missed something? Is he still recovering from an illness that he had last week?
Lamptey's fine. I just think I don't know. I just think, I mean, he could. I mean, but I guess Lamptey is almost more of a wing back than a right back, and I think right back requires a bit more defending. So
it'll be interesting to see what De Zerbi chooses. I do think Veltman's clearly the preferred option, but I don't know whether or not that's just because of Lamptey's unfortunate spell on the sidelines. I think he recovered from he had a muscular strain, I think, and as well he had a bit of a short battle with an illness. So I'm sure that they were just precautions that De Zerbi was taking. Veltman is, I mean, Veltman is Veltman. He comes in so much a wealth of experience, and he's so versatile at the back that you just can't help but just have him in that squad because you just know that when he's in there, you know you're going to get a solid defensive display from him, and it benefits everyone else around him because that kind of it his confidence is catching on everyone else, on Webster and Dunk, who are quite clearly the preferred partnership over Duncan Veltman, for instance. So it'll be interesting to see how we do actually set up, whether it's going to be 3 at the back or 4 at the back. Who knows? But it will. I think that's definitely going to be one of the main marks that De Zerbi needs to get absolutely spot on, because if Wolves get momentum, it'll be hard for us to actually claw that back in. That's the one bit I worry about. Despite even our fantastic display against Chelsea, if Wolves have that momentum going forward early on with a Wolves crowd that are going to be up for it, Molineu's not a great place to underestimate at all. And if you don't get it right, you're going to be in trouble for a fairly long period of time, and that'll be the tough challenge, I think. So I think we could be seeing ourselves set up a similar way to Chelsea, I think, which would be exciting, but risky at the same time. But that's exactly De Zerbi in a nutshell, I think.
I mean, I think I see it a bit differently. I think this is a really good opportunity for Brighton to go there and get a good win. I think just in terms of if you look at sort of every single metric, they haven't got a striker, they're leaking goals, the top scorer is a defensive midfield player, they've got injuries, they're without a manager. They seem a bit rudderless, and I think they, I think they will probably be thinking a draw will be a good result, and I think this is a very good opportunity to really take it to them. And if you've got Leandro Trossard, who's obviously been nominated for Player of the Month for his 5 goals in October, let loose.
Keep it away. Keep that ward away. I'm so superstitious with that kind of stuff. Keep it away. Don't want it there. Want the recognition. He deserves the recognition. Don't give him the award, please. I beg you guys.
Nice. But yeah, on one other thing that I thought was just shifting onto something slightly different. Not Graham Potter. Sorry, I force a habit. Roberto De Zerbi was asked about Lewis Dunk, and he was very effusive in his praise for the big man. He basically said, because obviously this week Dunk and Welbeck have been included in the 55-man provisional England squad for the World Cup. That's going to get cut down to 26. So a slim chance, I think, for either of them, especially Welbeck, because he hasn't scored yet. But he was kind of asked about that and just Dunk in general. And he said, in the past, I told you I don't want to speak about other coaches, and they was referencing sort of Southgate, other teams, but I can speak about my players. In this case, Lewis Dunk for me is one of the best centre backs in the Premier League. If Dunk goes to the World Cup, I will be happy for sure. The same for Welbeck, but it's not my job to decide the players to go to the World Cup. Does that raise the roof, or?
It's more just a case of I hope Southgate's hearing this, because we've known this for a very long time.
He does tune into teams like Brighton all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure he's probably heard De Zerbi's comments elsewhere, but I'm sure he's a big fan of what we do. Then again, I've got my own conspiracies about Southgate. I mean, De Zerbi didn't stutter when he said that. We don't stutter when we say it. Lewis Dunk is a fantastic all-round ball-playing defender. And he's not just a ball-playing defender. He could play as a no-nonsense centre-back. He could play as, a hard-tackling centre-back. He's the full package. He's exactly what you need in tournament football. And I mean, his long range passing is incredible. And if you want someone to quickly ping it down on the wings for a quick counter attack, who do you want? Maguire or Dunk? Shaw or Dunk? Who else? Who else can we think there's a bit under par?
Dunk.
Cody.
Cody
or Dunk? Then again, Cody offers something different, which I quite like about him. But Dunk, just give it to Dunk. Dunk's the one that's been performing so well and so consistently over the last 2-3 seasons, and yet we're talking about Harry Maguire all the bloody time. That, you know, someone who's cost Manchester United in excess of £80 million, and yet really hasn't secured a solid footing at United, and yet he's captain. I do not know how. He'd be one of the last people I think he'll be United captain in that squad, but Southgate sees something that many of us don't. And there are many better defenders out there, I think anyway, based on not just form but just all-round consistency that we can see. And yes, Southgate has mentioned in the past that Maguire's place is at risk. I think he's just saying that just to please the press and the crowd, really. I think Maguire's going to be on the plane. I don't think that there are going to be many other centre-backs who probably deserve it more who are going to be in that squad. I think Maguire's going to pip all of them, which is a shame. I just think that I think that if we don't take a risk on a few of these players at the back and just bring forward a newly shaped form side as a back three, personally, I think Tomori should be in that front three. I think it should be Tomori. I'm going to say Dunk, and I'm going to and the third one that could be Southgate's choice, but I mean, you got Tomori there, who is, you know, Serie A champion, and of course, he's former Brighton loanee, but he's been fantastic for AC Milan since he went there. And then you've got Lewis Dunk, who's just consistent week in, week out. And then you've got, I mean, Tarkowski, you've got Cody, you've got Ben White as well. There are so many brilliant defenders in the Premier League and abroad who can easily be able to say, I've got a case to say I'm better than Harry Maguire right now. Get me on that plane. But yeah, but anyway, back to De Zerbi. De Zerbi speaks sense.
On that point, I do agree. I think I agree and disagree. I don't think we have brilliant centre-back options. I think we have good ones. But I think, for example, if you compare to sort of the embarrassment of riches we have up top, you know, the kind of attacking midfield going forward, striking area, whatever, that is a real sort of strength in depth. I think at centre-back, but so where I agree is I think there are lots of centre-backs who are better than Harry Maguire. But yeah, Southgate power and all that jazz. But another, on the topic of new stuff, obviously, and I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation here. Obviously, this week, Brighton announced that they have signed coming in January, 17-year-old Facundo Buonanotte.
I think that's pretty much nailed on what the pronunciation is. So fair play. I haven't double checked at all. So
yes, he's an attacking midfielder from Rosario Central in Argentina. Brighton tried to buy him in just before the end of the summer transfer window, but the Argentinian side sort of pulled the plug. It seems basically a little bit of sort of like club politics. There was, I think, an election and some other things, so that didn't happen. But they've got their man. I've heard it could rise up to 10 million. Also, it's potentially up to the summer of 2026. So De Zerbi was asked about the 17-year-old who's he became this was his first proper season in first team football, and he played 34 times, scored 4 goals, a couple of assists. Carlos Tevez, obviously former Man United and Man City striker, probably a little bit hyperbolic, but likened him to Lionel Messi. Pinch of salt with that one. But on De Zerbi's comments, he said, normally I don't like to speak about the transfer market before it begins. And obviously Saturday is an important game against Wolves, but Boyanate is a very good player. I'm very happy for him and for us. He has a lot of potential, but he's also very good now. And this is also a little bit of a sign that De Zerbi's not afraid to bring in the youth, as he showed with Enciso, with his Premier League debut, an 18-year-old. He said, it is not important that he's nearly 18 because he's a good player. Like Enciso, that players are good players or not good players. So if you're good enough, you are going to get given the opportunity. So, yeah, Tommy, what do you reckon of what do you make of that signing? Well, it seems probably one for the future, and he could maybe go back on loan out, But it sounds like this could be another exciting talent on Brighton's books.
Yeah, I think it's just another fine example of the excellent recruitment team and the scouting network that we have, not just in South America, but across the globe. It just seems like we're 1, 2, 3 steps ahead of some of the biggest clubs in the world when it comes to young, promising recruitment prospects. So I think it's an excellent bit of business. I mean, I love all football, to be honest with you, and I'm a big fan of South American football. And one of the players I was actually reading about only a couple months ago was Facundo, and I thought, okay, this could be quite an exciting prospect. Be interested to see how he does, and by sheer luck, he ends up being a Brighton and Hove Albion player now, which again is just fantastic. It just shows the forward-thinking mentality that we have. Like, Bloom has invested so much money in this youth system that he wants to make sure that we not only bring forward youth prospects into the first team and get first team minutes under their belts instead of just the cameo League Cup appearances that you see at some other clubs. They are very much instilled in there is a progressive pathway for them to actually get solid Premier League minutes and be in the squad week in, week out. And I'm excited to see what he has to show, because I think Alexis McAllister has also said he's quite excited about this. I think it was him, but I mean,
I think his brother actually plays at Rosario Central.
There we go.
McAllister's brother, yeah. So, yeah.
And Carlos Tevez, like, the guy knows football, and if he's yes, like you say, like, take it with a pinch of salt what he said about the Messi comparison. But if we're talking about a player to have that kind of style and that approach, that is that is really exciting from a Brighton fan's perspective, for someone who I always remember missing out on the likes of Noel Hunt for £12,000 because Dick Knight wasn't able to have enough funds, or that we had signings that didn't want to join us because they didn't want to play on the athletics track. Like, that, there have been so many comical moments in the transfer window for us, and now we're in this position where we're getting some of the best wonder kids that people was rant and rave about on Football Manager. It's amazing how much we have progressed, and it's just overall just really exciting to see how he does. I believe he's joining us in January, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, that's when. Yeah, because but yeah, it didn't actually say in terms of if he'll go back out on loan. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because I think the Argentinian season gets underway in late January. So it could be a case of like Dennis Undav type thing going back, or
like you say, he goes down the Undav route. He goes to Royal Union.
Yeah,
it's in July.
Yeah,
so
well trodden path.
Yeah, why not? Just get himself a bit of a taste of Belgian football, maybe a touch of Europa League football as well. Who knows? Oof. Treat yourself, lads.
Yeah, I mean, with that one, yeah, I think because he's played a few times for I think maybe 5 caps for Argentina's under 20 side. So I think he'll be in a similar situation to likes of Matoma and I guess Caicedo, but initially maybe I think basically they will. He'll have to go to like a Belgium or somewhere in Europe to get enough points to get a work permit and visa type thing. I don't think he will be able to just slot in straight away like Enciso did. But so I spoke to just a little bit more about him. If you've had a chance to watch footage of him, I'd recommend it because he's a really, really kind of, in terms of just his dribbling style, it's a lovely kind of gliding style. Lovely creative control, really good left foot, not afraid to take on the defense, quite direct. So I spoke to an Argentinian journalist called Adriano Savalli, and he told me that the great strength of Facundo is his versatility. He can play almost anywhere across the entire attacking front line. He has great techniques and knows how to use his body well to win individual duels. He is explosive, punchy, and goes back to helping defense when their team attacks. He is a Swiss Army knife and is very complete for his age. While he needs to be at his best in the bigger games as well, the possibility of him improving is immense. And just to add on that, Savalli said that Facundo is sort of part of this new exciting wave of Argentinian talent, and I'm not sure if listeners will know these guys, but he says together with Facundo Farias, Maximo Peroni, Valentino Gomez, Julian Fernandez, Ramiro Enrique, and Martin Ojeda, they are footballers who have everything to go far in the game because they've made a big difference at a young age. So in terms of just, the hype coming out of Argentina, this one is a real talent.
Yeah, and like you say, it's so exciting to see. Again, really looking forward to it. And Bloom has hinted that De Zerbi will be back in the January transfer window as well. And the fact that we've got this behind us to look forward to in January, whether or not he starts live at Sussex by the Sea now, or if he goes out on loan later, that's another time. But quite clearly, again, it's just great to see that we're investing for the future always. But yeah, brilliant to see. Well done to the recruitment team. Brilliant to see Winston Lee still doing his job. Whether or not he'll be here or not, that'll be another matter.
Yeah. One final thing, just on before we throw ahead to the Wolves game to chat with Bowman Live reporter. There was an interesting little bit when De Zerbi was asked about the differences between him as a manager and him as a player. And this question then led to about 6 different questions from like different journalists, just sort of picking up on sort of every single word that he said pretty much. So he said, and for me, this just like is a reason why Brighton fans have warmed to De Zerbi so much, and why he comes across as a very likable chap. So he said, I was a crazy player because I didn't love the rules. I didn't love a lot of my coaches. It was always a war with them. To be a player and to be a coach is totally different. I prefer to be a coach. This little bit says, my work is fantastic. I think what he's trying to say is that he loves the job. I think it's not just him bigging himself up, but he says you can give one idea to 20 or so players. One idea and just, very pervasive. This is amazing. So I love that. You got crazy player, didn't love the rules. I did not love my coaches. It was a war with them. Things like that. Yeah. What do you reckon?
I love it. When I was reading up on De Zerbi, I read quite a fair bit about his time as a player, and he definitely seemed to be that nuisance in the dressing room, and it just seemed to be that he was more agitating and just maybe not having a bigger presence in the game, or maybe he just clashed with the coach's personality. And he said that's just the way life is, and that's the way football is. But when you're someone like De Zerbi, you just know that it's just you just won't like it at all. You won't move on from it. You will hold a grudge as a player. But it's quite interesting to see how, ironically, he's now become a coach, and definitely when you compare the histories on paper and the CVs on paper between player and coach, his coaching career speaks greater volumes than he does in his playing time anyway. We're talking about someone who was quite a hard-hitting midfielder, and now he's quite a kind of an intelligent coach who looks at the particulars of certain matches and sets himself up match by match, and has a very much a kind of like the pretty football philosophy that people like to see and want to see every week. So yeah, fair play to him. I admire the honesty, and I think that's something that we aren't used to seeing at times from many managers who probably just stick to a PR script and just move on from there. And they say the classic cliches, but De Zerbi's not afraid to stick his neck on the line and maybe make some comments, not just about himself, but he'll throw a spanner in the works, i.e. Lewis Dunk for the World Cup, who should be on the plane to Qatar, but we've already discussed that. So I think I think the more honest and more he's able to be that vulnerable in the press, I think the more respect he gets, not just from us as fans, but I think from neutrals and as well as that, I think the press as well. So fair play to him.
And final thing before we chat to Alex Dicken, Tomo, what is your prediction for Saturday's game?
Yes, so I won't be able to make the chat with Alex Dicken, sadly, but I'm feeling confident for this match. So I think we're going to go for a 2-0 win at Molineux.
Nice. I'm going to go for less convincing, but I think a 2-1 away win. And all aboard the De Zerbi Express. So, yes, but we're going to find out a lot more about Wolves from someone who actually knows what they're talking about on the club, Alex Dicken from Birmingham Live, and we'll hear what he has to say shortly. Hi, everyone. We've got Alex Dicken, Wolves reporter for Birmingham Live, joining us on Teams Like Brighton. Alex, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Let's get straight to it. How would you assess Wolves' season so far? It's probably a short question, but probably many answers to that.
Been a bit of a car crash, to be honest. Bigger things are expected. Obviously, they did very well last season before falling away over the last 2 or 3 months. Signed some good players in the summer. Probably left their squad a little imbalanced in defence. There wasn't a lot of depth at centre-back experience-wise, so that's been a bit of an issue this season. But they signed some good players. Mateus Nunes coming in for £38 million, Champions League level player. Gonzalo Guedes as well, coming from Valencia for big money as well. So they're expected to kick on, but they haven't. They've continued that trend of last season when they were very poor towards the end, and it was 1 win in 15 Premier League games by the time Bruno Lage was sacked this time last month. So, and things haven't improved since. Been 1 win in 5. They lost 3 of those games since he was sacked. So it's getting worse if anything. It does look as though it could get better soon with the appointment of Julian Lopetegui, but again, he's probably not going to be able to influence anything before the World Cup break. So, as things stand, with 2 difficult games coming up against Brighton and Arsenal in the league, both at Molineux, it looks like Wolves will be in the relegation place going into that break.
So, yeah, thanks for that. That's a really good detailed answer. If you could put one, put it down to one thing, or is that just not the case? There's just a multitude of factors, really?
There are trends in football, aren't there? And I think we could see that Wolves are on a downward trajectory from the end of last season. They tried to change that by signing players, but again, I think Wolves' biggest issue is there's been mismanagement in terms of there's not been a great deal of succession planning at the club. They've obviously sacked a manager, but the perfect example, actually Brighton, the perfect example, because you've got Brighton who lost a manager in Graham Potter and then had immediately 3 or 4 candidates that fit their philosophy that they wanted to go and get, and eventually they got their man. Whereas Wolves sacked their manager, had one guy in mind who was put forward by an agent. He then told them that he wasn't coming. Then they've kind of looked elsewhere in a bit of a panic and found a guy who then didn't come. And then they've shelved their managerial search and have, returned to the guy who didn't want to come a month ago, but now he might come. So It's very kind of a short-sighted approach, in my opinion, at the moment. And I think the ownership and the chairman, Jeff Sheehy, needs to take a lot of responsibility for how this season has unravelled.
And in terms of, I guess, until that break comes, which is obviously only a couple of weeks away now, do you think there's a chance for Wolves to maybe like have a slightly better picture, or do you see the sort of slide continuing?
I don't. I think they're best against Brighton. I'd say a point. I don't think they'll get anything against Arsenal. The biggest issue is that they can't score goals. They haven't been able to score goals the last 2 seasons either. This season it's been magnified because they conceded a fair few as well. In the first, I think 6 games or something, I think before the Man City game, Wolves had the best defensive record in the league. So they started okay. It's just they weren't scoring goals. They played well in some of those early games, and the issue is the striking situations. Dire. They've signed a player of 50 million in Sasha Kaladzic, who has done his ACL first game. Raul Jimenez hasn't been fit since the summer. He's not played in 2 months. And then they've signed Diego Costa as an emergency striker. And he's kind of been working on his fitness in the last 5 games or so. And to be fair, he has been getting better. But, he's got a needless red card against Brentford and he'll miss the next 3 games. So they're without a striker again, which, Bruno Lage, the former manager, will constantly point out that they haven't won a game this season without a striker. So it's that again. And, they've scored 6 goals this season. They haven't scored more than 1 goal in any particular game. So, the law of average at the moment against a team with the quality in attack that Brighton have got. Brighton are going to score a goal. Wolves aren't going to score more than 1. So it was like against Leicester the week. I went to the game expecting Leicester to beat them purely on the basis that Leicester can score goals. If Wolves had scored 1 that day, Leicester probably would have scored 2. So that's the big issue they've got. They're relying on 1-0 wins. And against, decent teams in this league, which in my opinion, Nottingham Forest and Southampton, the only 2 teams Wolves have beaten aren't, you're not gonna get results.
You touched upon the sort of defensive issues. Can you just shed some light a bit on why Conor Coady was loaned out? Because it just seemed like he was, the stalwart of that defence. He was a very good player,
Yeah. So this is the most commonly asked question from outside of Wolves, and I understand why people ask it, but I don't think Bruno Lage made him. No, it's fine. I don't think Bruno Lage made any mistake getting rid of letting Conor Coady leave. I think it was fine. He'd signed Nathan Collins, he'd got Max Kilman, and he wanted to go to a back 4, and he worked hard on going to a back 4 during the summer. And those 2 were going to be his first choice centre backs. Conor Coady, Bruno would have kept Conor Coady around, as 3rd choice. He wanted to keep, Willy Bolly as well as 3rd choice when Coady had left, but both wanted to leave and go and pursue first team football elsewhere. Coady one was an easy one for Wolves because they weren't going to stand in his way. They kind of let him make his own mind up. And he obviously has England ambitions, wants to go and play regular football, got that at Everton, he's doing well, fair enough. But the argument was that Collins and Kilman, were going to be ahead of him. And to be honest, I think they've come in for some unfair criticism recently. The pair of them haven't played that well in recent weeks, admittedly, but they are very good players. And, Wolves think they've got 2 massive prospects on their hands there. Both those players could quite easily be transferred for massive sums of money in the next few years. So they obviously, feel vindicated in promoting them and giving them this playing time. The Coady one was purely based on the fact that Wolves weren't going to play a back 3 anymore. And I know he's gone to Everton, now they're playing a back 4 and he's doing okay. But in my opinion, Collins and Kilman are better suited to the back 4. Although it hasn't gone that well in the last few weeks.
Fair enough. Obviously you say they've only scored 6 goals, but who were sort of because Wolves have shown in previous seasons that their level is top 10 at least. So who are the sort of the danger men that Brighton should be wary of?
Yeah, so Ruben Neves has been the club's best player in every single game he's played this season. So he's the guy that's got to be watched out for. It's a miracle that he's still here in his 6th season at the club. So I doubt it'll, it's not going to go on much longer. He'll be gone by next summer. But yeah, he's the club's top scorer as well with 3 goals. So when you've got a defensive midfielder who's scored the most goals, but it's not that's probably part of the problem. Daniel Penance is good in patches. He hasn't been so good the last few weeks, but he is probably the team's most creative player in terms of chances. Adama Traore is coming into a little bit of form since Bruno left. You know, he didn't get much of a run in the starting 11 at all when Bruno was here, but the interim coaching staff have put him into his favoured right wing position. He's done okay in games. You know, against Palace, he did well. He scored against Chelsea the first game. He created a couple of chances, and against Nottingham Forest in that 1-0 win, he did well as well. So I'd say those three players, to be honest. We're kind of unsure over who will replace Costa in attack. Potentially Hwang or Gonzalo Guedes. I mean, Guedes has been a massive disappointment since he came to the club. So, you know, I'm not sure there'll be many people in favour of him leading the line against Brighton. But £27.5 million, he's got to be put in sometime, I suppose. So, yeah, those three, you know, Neves, Adama, and Penance are the ones to watch. Although if Mateus Nunes is fit, he went off last weekend with a shoulder injury, then yeah, you know, there's probably no one more talented than him in the Wolves squad.
And we're filming this on Thursday, and obviously your press conference ahead of the game is on Friday. But for what we do know now, can you just run us through Wolves' sort of team news, who might be missing or who could come back, please?
Yeah, so Costa will be suspended after that red card, so it means they're going into the game without a striker, which was the case at the beginning of the season as well. Everyone else, I think, should be fine. There's obviously a doubt over Mateus Nunes. But it won't be much change from the game last weekend. You know, they've got long term injury issues with Jimenez, Pedro Neto's out as well. So I don't think I'm missing anyone else. But yeah, so I think that's it. I think the only absentee from last weekend will be Costa, and potentially there's a doubt over Mateus because he picked up a shoulder injury and had to be subbed.
Right, and the thing that we always ask is we put reporters on the spot and say, please, can you give us your score prediction for the game?
Wolves desperately need something, so I'm going to go 1-1. I don't think they're going to keep a clean sheet, but and like I said earlier, I can't see them scoring more than one goal at the moment. So I think 1-1 is probably the best that can be hoped for in this situation. So that's what I'll go for.
Great. Well, Alex, thanks so much for your time. I'll let you get on with your busy day. But yes, thanks again, and see you guys soon.